Hey everyone, my name is Lance, and this is Amped About Aimpad. It's been a couple of months since my last video and figured I should update you on what's been going on. So I was over at PC Perspective about a month or two ago, and I did a nice little interview with Ryan Shrout. I want to shout out to him. It was a great time. I'll put a link to the in the descriptions below. I've also been spending a lot of time with switches and lots of different varieties of switches and different manufacturers and things like that. And I wanted to give you an understanding of what process I go through while I'm testing out switches and some new ideas of what I've had with some of these different types of switches and how we can actually use them using our analog technology. So let's jump right into it. Alright, so here's my Aimpad switch validation PCB tool. It's basically a way that we can measure the quality of different switches and the effects that we can get for analog ranges on each of those different switches. So there's 6 sensors that are mounted on these 6 switches, and it gives us an idea of the range of values that we can get as we push the key down. So an ideal switch will give you a really high value at the very, very top of the key press and a very low value at the very bottom of the key press. So for example, this green switch, it's going to be the very far right value. Right now it's 3124. If I start pushing it down, those values will slowly decrease more and more as I push them all the way down. At the very bottom it ends up at 2278. When I release it, it's 3085. So it's a decent range of values. This yellow switch is the very first column. It's currently at 2743. If I push it down, keep pushing it down, and all the way down, it goes down to 850. So it's a very, very large range. So the yellow switch is of a higher quality for our purposes than the green switch. I also have this switch that has no top mounted to it and there's no stem in it. So if I stick my finger in there, you can see in the middle values, those ones are changing from 3197, and it'll just keep going down as I stick my finger in there. So basically any type of stem that is reflective to infrared light will give us some type of range of values, and I'm trying to find out what switches and which colors and qualities and things like that give us the best results. So on previous videos I showed this graph that kind of did the testing of yellows and reds and blues and greens, and you can see that the values for blues and greens were around 400 counts, so a range of 400. Reds were around 550-ish, or these were Zelios and Gateron reds, but the cherry red was somewhere around 800, and yellows were around 1300, somewhere around there. So we've gone through some different revisions and changes in the way that we've mounted the sensors, and some tweaks and tuning of the sensors. So now we have these results, and they're significantly better. So previously we showed that the green and blues were around 400, now they're nearly 800, and the cherry reds were around 800 or so, and now they're somewhere around 1100. I've also added a few more tests. I've got some cherry red silent switches and some silver switches and some cherry black silent switches. The normal black switches still are not very good. They won't do hardly anything. They give you an inverse relationship, a negative value, the more you push them in. So actually I can show that real quick. The black switch is mounted here. So if I start off at 2723, it's supposed to go down as I push it up, but as I push it down, it will actually increase and go to 2802, and when I release it, it goes down. So that's horrible. You don't want to use a black switch, unfortunately. But a black silent switch, we've got that to be above 200, which is pretty decent. It's not fantastic. It's still somewhere around where browns were horrible. I think they were like 30 or 50. We got those to be somewhere pretty reliably close to 150-ish, I think. It's not fantastic as much as a red or yellows and things like that, but it's pretty good. And blacks, silents, they have a different color. They're not completely solid black, and there's some of the properties around it that allow us to get some type of measurement. It's still not quite as good. Now, cherry silver speed switches, they have some difficult problems for our purposes. So if I kind of show you this switch, this is a speed switch. The problem with the speed switches is that as you push them down, you can't actually push them in all the way. There's some feet at the bottom of the stem that prevents you from pushing it all the way. They're nice for normal cherry activation because they activate much earlier, but you can't push them all the way down, so they bottom out a lot faster. It's bad for us because it gives you less range of motion for a high value and a low value. It's not horrible. It's above 400, which was previously what our blues and greens were at. So it's probably passable. I wouldn't recommend, and I probably won't validate anything less than that. So cherry silver speed switches are viable and you can use them, but anything below that is not going to be good. Now cherry and green are back up to 800. Previously they're down to 400, so we've done some significant improvements there. And reds now are about 1100, almost 1200, and the yellows are about 1600, so they're still fantastic. But again, these are average values. If we look at, these are like the raw measurements that I took, and basically what I did was took each stem and stuck it in each individual, basically each location. So there's different properties about these different switches. So all I did was just remove the top of these and then move the switch stem along and get the different values, and this is the average values of all of them. So the yellow ones, even though the average is 1600, if I go to the highest one, I think it was 1900, is almost 2000 counts of measurements. So if you can precisely place where those switches are, then you can get some significant results. So more or less what I'd like to say is we've increased the range of motion across a huge variety of switches, and they're all viable for the most part now, except for possibly the brown and black switches. Now, what would you want to use for green and blues that are pretty horrible because they have that big clicky sound and clicky movement in the middle of the key press? So you can see, and when I push it, you can hear the click. So that makes it difficult to accurately control an analog movement. However, there's other ways that we can use the values that we're getting from this key press by maybe, say, at the click, we want to activate a normal key press, but then as we push it down all the way, we want to activate another key press. And I think using blue and green switches, that is actually a pretty viable way to use this analog information. It may not be ideal for analog movement, but it might be super ideal for games that you would play that you would want to activate two functions underneath a single key. And I decided the best game to probably use that for is a game called Heroes of the Storm. And so I'd like to kind of demonstrate how Heroes of the Storm can be beneficial using two activation points within a single key press.
Let's get going.
All right, so here we have Heroes of the Storm. For those that are unfamiliar with it, it's very similar to League of Legends, where you have 5 versus 5, each team trying to destroy the other team's base, and you have different characters that have different abilities. Some might be tanks, some might be attackers, or spellcasters, or healers, and things like that, but pretty standard fare. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of show the difference of how an analog keyboard can be used in this particular game, by showing how hotkeys are assigned. So by default, Q, W, E, and R is assigned to activate different spells. So for example, if I push Q, it will show the area of effect of that Q spell, and then if I left click, it will activate that spell. There's a different way to cast a ability by using quick cast. That quick cast is different in that if you push this key, as soon as you push that key, wherever your mouse happens to be on the screen, that spell will instantly activate. So for example, I've assigned U, I, O, and P to be assigned to those different keys, or those different abilities. So as soon as the U is activated, that spell will activate. So since this is an analog keyboard, I can actually assign two keys to the same key press. So for example, this Q key, it's a blue switch. If I push down the Q just a little bit so it makes that clicking sound, you'll see that the Q lights up in that bottom right corner that the Q is activated. If I push it down all the way, then the U will be activated. So I have a stacked ability, one that's going to show just the area of effect, and then if I push it down all the way, it will actually activate that spell. So if I really just want to activate that spell, I just push the button all the way and it will activate the spell. So let's see what that looks like in the game. So one thing I like to point out is if I push down this Q key, you'll see that it shows that area of effect in the range and however far it's going to be activated. And if I push it down all the way, it will go ahead and shoot it. If I just push it down all the way, it'll just shoot it wherever my mouse happens to be. The same thing with this W ability. It makes this nice circle, and the E key makes a nice little cone. So if I want to stack up my abilities or try and hit this guy, let's just say I hit that all the way, and then my W key and push it down all the way, it will actually activate that spell. The other thing is this game actually gives you a visual indication of whether or not a spell is going to connect with someone of the other team or your teammates. So when this guy responds again, I'll show you. By default, it's going to show this yellowish border around it, but as soon as I line it up with the guy, it shows that it's going to be green, and that means if I push down all the way, it's going to connect with that character. Now there's the ultimate ability of this character is a ring shape. So if I put the person right in the middle of the ring, the spell of effect is still yellow, which means I'm going to completely miss them. So it's useful to know that I need to actually hit them on the edge, but unless I play this game for thousands of hours, I might not know exactly where that ring is going to be, so I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to connect with them. So it's useful to have the piece of information of what the area of effect of that spell is going to be before I actually press it. And it's nice that I have this nice tactical click that I can feel before I commit to hitting that spell. So if I'm hiding in this bush and I know how far away I can hit them safely, I can line it up and then activate it and not miss them, because I have all the ability of the information ready for me to activate that spell, simply because I have 2 stacked abilities under a single key. Alright, so showing Heroes of the Storm an effective way to use a clicky switch by activating one type of ability in the middle of the key press and another ability at the bottom of the key press. And I think it's an effective demonstration of how an analog key, even with some type of tactile or clicky response, can still be effectively used for gaming purposes. Hopefully you liked that video. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and subscribe. We have a lot of things coming out soon that I am eager to share with you. But until then, thank you for watching.